And for more analysis, joining us now from Washington is Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center, to unpack how Israel's attack on Qatar is reshaping Gulf politics and what it means for regional stability. Thank you so much, Mr. Russell, for joining us on Q News. It was a pleasure having you. Now, how do you interpret the timing and intention behind Israel's strike in Doha? Was it purely tactical or part of a larger regional posture shift?
Well, first of all, good evening, Hala. Always good to be with you. Look, the only way to describe the Israeli unjustified and unwarranted attack on Qatari sovereignty in Doha the other day was illogical. It makes no sense. You know, from just a grand strategy standpoint, you know, at least the intelligence has shown you that you are trying to take out the people that are trying to look at the proposal put forward by your biggest ally, America, and they're trying to figure out if this is the way forward. And then what you do is, while they're trying to find a road to a peaceful solution, you go and you create this illegal and unjustifiable act. That's illogical. That makes no sense. From a strategic standpoint, it makes no sense because of the fact that now, if you are trying to, if in fact getting your hostages home are a priority, you don't take out the ones that are trying to negotiate getting those hostages back to you. If anything, this has made it more secure that they possibly put the lives of their own people in jeopardy, because there's no reason for them to, you know, to maintain keeping these hostages alive as a negotiation to cessation of hostilities. It was a broadly bad move that has overstepped all kinds of boundaries, and it's biting them in the rear end right now in Tel Aviv.
So what message does this send to Gulf states like Qatar, also Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, all of whom have either formal or informal ties with Israel?
Well, I mean, look at the Abrams Accords. I mean, there is every indication that this action, unless there is some big movement, that this action puts Donald Trump's signature Abrams Accords in jeopardy. There's no real reason strategically, from a security or a diplomatic standpoint, for any of the Gulf states, particularly the UAE, who is directly involved in the Abrams Accord, for them to maintain that relationship and maintain being a party to those accords. It definitely makes Saudi reconsider. It makes MBS very much reconsider the ability for them to start the path forward for diplomatic recognition and normalization. And it completely, the biggest impact is the Qataris. The Qataris from day one have been trying to negotiate along with President al-Sisi and the Egyptian leadership. But as far as, you know, from day one, putting all in as far as being acting in good faith player to try and come up with a peaceful solution, when the U.S. asked the Qatari government to host Hamas as a place that they could have dialogue, Qatar did it. They did it when Trump asked, when Biden asked, when Obama asked, and when Trump asked again to keep them. They did it. They didn't ask questions. Why? Because they are a good partner. When the attack from Israel happened, that completely blew that relationship into jeopardy. That is a big deal, and it should be a big deal for the U.S.
Yes, it should be. Okay, has Netanyahu effectively torpedoed the Abraham Accords spirit? Is normalization now in retreat?
Absolutely. Our discussions with people both in the region here in Washington, D.C., is that there is a definite concern that the Abrams Accords could be in dire jeopardy. And the bottom line here is there is no reason. Look, you are talking about the Gulf states, which, I mean, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain all did a blockade. They were butting heads. They were at odds with each other just several years ago. And now Benjamin Netanyahu, in one just completely inconceivable act, has brought them all together and solidified the Gulf states in unison. That is a big surprise. If you had told me that that was possible, I would have said that that's crazy. There's animosity there, and Netanyahu's done the complete opposite. The big thing here is Benjamin Netanyahu has also brought the wrath of the entire global community on them and has managed to alienate them even further from both allies and adversaries. It makes no sense.
Makes no sense. So, to what extent does this attack reflect Netanyahu's disregard for diplomacy and multilateral negotiation frameworks? Because, Mr. Russell, you just told me that with this strike, he actually managed to bring former foes together and make them even more united. And it even doesn't make any sense, as you mentioned, because if he has any regards to the safety of the detainees, those people that he attempted to assassinate were there trying to negotiate the deal on a neutral land. So is this disregard for diplomacy and multilateral negotiation frameworks by Netanyahu?
You know what? I can't even begin, Paula, to try and understand the mindset and the mentality of Benjamin Netanyahu in this situation. What I can tell you is that the optics of it say that, you know, all of this discussion, all of the press statements, and all of the talking points that we're here coming out of Tel Aviv are nothing but jazz hands. It's a diplomatic and political kabuki dance, because when they say that, like, look, we are looking to save and protect the Israeli people, this action puts the Israeli people in jeopardy. When he is talking about we are going to defend our right to sovereignty, when you have allies in the region that are recognizing your sovereignty and trying to, you know, bring that to a greater audience and get more neighbors in the Gulf states and in the Arab world to recognize your legitimacy and sovereignty, this action does the exact reverse of that. And what we're seeing now, quite frankly, Hala, is the fact that we saw it today earlier when the UN just voted on a resolution a few hours ago condemning the Israeli attack on Doha. The big talking point here is the U.S. voted in favor of it. This never would have happened before this. This never would have happened until today. And that should be a clear signal to Tel Aviv, you have crossed a line that even your biggest ally says is out of bounds.
Okay. Well, speaking of that in particular, speaking of Israel's biggest ally, the United States, how is the United States, particularly under Trump's current term, navigating this rupture? Is Washington's credibility in the region now eroding?
Hala, you and I have spoken many times on this network, and you know I'm not a huge fan of the Trump administration's policy on this.
Yes. The reason I'm asking that, Mr. Russell, is because Trump has been, and he's a clear supporter of Netanyahu's actions in the region, no matter what happens. That's why I'm asking this question. You're the best to answer.
And it's a really good question, Hala. That's the thing, is the crux of what's happening is, and this is where the Trump administration has painted itself into a corner. On one hand, the U.S. government's position has been that, you know, supporting Israel and its right to defend itself and its right to protect its sovereignty and its citizens is non-negotiable. They painted themselves into a corner this time because when Benjamin Netanyahu decided to launch a preemptive, unjustified attack on the sovereign soil of Doha into a civilian neighborhood and hitting hitting Qatari nationals and the loss of innocent Qatari national lives, That crossed a big line. And what has happened is Donald Trump has to balance the fact of where do we go from here? My understanding is that even though there have been public statements saying that any sort of tension between Washington and Doha is not true, it's been played out in the American. My understanding is that there is a deep, deep, deep anger out of Doha against the U.S. For both. Basically, what it is we work with you. You are supposed to be our strategic partner, and that when you do something like bomb Iran or you green light an attack by Israel, it affects us. They're not attacking the U.S. They're attacking sovereign Qatari soil. We are doing this because
and the U.S. as well, Mr. Russell, because we shouldn't forget that the United States has the biggest military base in the Gulf region, Al Udeid. So, what impact could this have on U.S. strategic military positioning in the region, particularly with bases in Qatar and Bahrain as well?
Look, remember that when Trump decided to condemn the Biden withdrawal, when Trump first negotiated the withdrawal from Afghanistan, that plan was to have over-the-horizon capabilities by the U.S. and allied forces. That over-the-horizon capability from an air and strategic standpoint was always going to be Al Udeid Air Base in Doha. That is the largest base in the U.S. arsenal. It is a key component for Central Command. It is a key component for DOD and for NATO allies that are based in that Central Command AOR. When you sit there and you greenlight an attack and that attack happens, look, I've spent a lot of time in Doha. The area where this attack was held was basically a diplomatic, it's like Embassy Row here in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of diplomatic housing. There's a lot of embassies in that area. This could have been even worse if they had missed by just a fraction. But the biggest point I'm trying to make here is that neighborhood where the attack happened is only maybe 6 or 7 miles away from Al Udeid Air Base. And you're talking about allowing this to happen within miles of your biggest strategic on the sovereign soil of your partner there. That has put the U.S. military, the U.S. strategy, and the U.S. diplomatic credibility in great danger right now in the region, particularly with our best friend, the Qataris.
Okay. My final question to you, sir. Now, does this shift present an opportunity for regional realignment, perhaps drawing Gulf states closer to China, Turkey, perhaps Russia?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, if I can promise you that the ambassador from China, the ambassador from Russia, the ambassadors from all of the BRICS alliance nations have gone to the palace in Doha to talk to the Emiri staff and talk to, and not just in Doha, I guarantee that the same dialogue is happening in Riyadh, it's happening in Abu Dhabi, it is happening in Oman. I can tell you right now, what's happening is they are going in saying, hey, you know what? Your best buds, you can't trust your best friends. You can't trust your American partners anymore because they can't even protect you. And they can't even swear off or stop an attack on your sovereignty from happening. You know what would happen if we were your friend? We would never allow that to happen. We would actively stop. And of course, if you are the emir or the head of state in any of the Gulf states, let alone any partner state in the region, they would sit there and say, you know what, you're right. You know what, you want a spot at Al Udeid, you want a spot at Riyadh, you want a spot here and talking to us and be our strategic partner, let's talk. That's an economic incentive. That's a trade incentive.
Yes.
This was a big blowback for both Netanyahu and possibly for the U.S.
Exactly. Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, always a pleasure talking with you, and I'd like to thank you so much for that comprehensive analysis. Thank you so much.